Hey, what's up, guys? Episode 270 something of Richard Metal Fan interviews here at the Star Bar in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm here with the headliner tonight. I'm here with the Xebellian Triangle. We have Ivy. So, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Had a nice good sleep on the way up here, so nice and well rested for tonight.
Awesome. So I know you've been on this awesome run with our friends in Ice Giant, as well as we have good Atlanta support. We have Scorched Moon and Jaeger. So how has this run been? The most typical interview question ever, I always say.
So tonight is day 2. Yesterday went really well. It's our first time meeting the Ice Giant people in person. We've been like internet friends for a little bit and been connected there, but we get along great. The chemistry is good. The dynamics are good. So I'm excited for the rest of this run. It's going to be really, really, really fun.
Awesome. So basically the format of my show is I want to talk about like your musical history and sort of talk about the history of Xebellian Triangle. So kind of growing up, what were the first bands that got you into metal? What made you want to play your respective instrument?
So I guess to go all the way to the beginning as far as interest in metal, I was one of the Guitar Hero 3 kids. So Killswitch, Slipknot, that was kind of mostly what I was jamming entirely back in that time. But when I grew up playing like brass instruments in middle school, and then eventually took an interest in guitar, and then I started taking guitar lessons, and then my guitar teacher, he had gotten me into Children of Bodom and Nevermore and so on and so forth, a lot of those melodic death metal bands. Eventually, I kind of latched onto Amon Amarth pretty heavily, and seeing Amon Amarth live on the Searcher Rising tour when it was just them playing all of Searcher Rising and then their regular set after that, that was like, that's what I want to play. I want to do that. I want to do that.
Hell yeah. And so were you in any bands before starting up the Xebellian Triangle, or was it Xebellian Triangle your first band?
I've been in a couple. So our drummer, Aaron, and myself, we played in a high school band together. That was my first band. One of our songs, The Living Autopsy, is a song that we played back then. So that would be 13 years ago, I think, is how long that song's been around. So we did that. And then all of us in the band were in the same grade except for Aaron. He was a year behind us. So when we all graduated high school, we kind of like did a different band. Most of the same people minus Aaron, and then that band was around for a couple years. So the high school band was called Crypt Alive, and then the band after that was called the Isdal Cadaver, and it was a lot of these same very songs being played. So we did that. I was also in like a pop punk band, and then I did like an Anal Nathrak kind of band that was called Suicide Pandemic. Then I took a couple of years off, and then Aaron had gone to college for an aerospace degree, and he had filled in for Isdal Cadaver for one show. Was like, hey, these songs are really fun, so we should jam these sometime. And that's basically how the band started. Was he hit me up, and then Xebellian Triangle became like the third iteration of our high school band.
Yeah, because y'all formed in 2019.
Yes, he hit me up towards the end of 2018, but we like officially got things going 2019. So I usually like to say 2019 is when it was really happening.
All right, so tell me about like those first shows as Xebellian Triangle. What was that like?
It was very interesting because back in that time we were a 3-piece. We had a different vocalist. It was kind of, I guess, a shock to a lot of people to have like a symphonic death metal band, because we had a couple other like melodic death metal bands, but no one was really trying to do the full-on symphonic death metal thing in Houston. You had like one or two bands, like you had an old band called Dawn of Dissolution, which doesn't exist anymore. They kind of did some of the symphonic stuff. Originally they were very Winter Sun, and then they moved more towards like a Wolfheart kind of sound before they dissolved. So those shows were fun, and people were really taken aback by our original vocalist, Aaron's drumming, the riffs that I play, all the orchestrations that I've done for the songs. It was just something very different for the Houston scene, which is very, very like brutal death and hardcore oriented.
All right, and then tell me about like that demo, the Blood Watcher from 2021. Well, tell me about that.
So that was pretty much the final. So like the guitars, bass, and orchestra were like the final stems, but like not very well mixed. And then Aaron had done like a drum playthrough for fun, so I just had the audio from that. And then our original vocalist, she had just done a quick one take of the song and put that together, because we were playing shows, but we hadn't had our album released yet, and people were like really wanting to go listen to our music. So we just put that together really, really quickly, just so that somebody would be able to find us on some sort of platform, just even if it was just the one song.
All right, and then tell me about making the debut full-length album At the Banks of Rubicon. So what was sort of like the writing and recording process like for the debut full-length Xebellian Triangle album?
So kind of like what I was getting into the history of at the beginning was kind of like, we have like one song that's from our high school band, and then the majority of these songs were written for the second band, Isle Cadaver, and that album was like in the process of being recorded, and then the band fell apart. So over the years, probably something like 3-4 years, I was like rewriting a lot of the riffs, changing a lot of stuff, just in general, kind of making everything a little bit more with fine polished detail on it. So the recording process of it was kind of lengthy, because I think I started it like tail end of 2019. Was trying to get things going. Pandemic happened, so I had a lot more time to sit and orchestrate during lockdown. Then we got our original vocalist, and we recorded her vocals October through November of 2021, I believe. And then I mixed it pretty much from then until January of 22, pretty much.
All right.
So it was a very long production cycle.
All right, because during that time, the pandemic happened. I know it kind of like fucked up the whole music industry and stuff. Did the pandemic at all sort of like influence the writing of the album, or do you try to keep that completely separate?
It didn't really affect it that much, as far as like, if you're meaning like subject-wise, like having the pandemic influence any sort of like lyric topics or anything like that. Although I think there's one song on there I was kind of like, it's kind of your typical I'm very pissed off at my job kind of thing. So, but of course taking that and moving it to a much more over-the-top sort of existential sort of thing to kind of fit in the genre. Just like the woes of living in a very hyper-capitalist, late capitalist society, and some of the issues that can arise from that, and watching inflation go up and people getting paid more after the pandemic, but the dollar going less as far as the power of spending and so on.
All right. And what inspires like the songwriting process for the Xebellian Triangle?
Usually I try and think of some sort of topic first, because I find it way easier to write a compelling melody or riff, or even just have a general structure of what I want to tell the story with musically. So I usually start with an idea of, a lyric topic, and then I'll write towards that to try and convey sort of, in my sort of ethereal sort of sense, what that word or topic sounds like in my head. And then the topic doesn't necessarily always stay the same, because it can very much change. Like we have a song, Zerstör die Schwarze Sonne, which was very much just like a song started out as like about the heat death of the universe, and then it became sort of like an anti-fascist piece. So it's the lyrics have gone through many mutations, but as long as there's like that core idea to start with.
Awesome. And like the album artwork for the album is actually really amazing. So who did the album artwork, and that in a way sort of like influence like the songs at all?
Yeah, so that would be, the artist is Votek. He goes by Moonroot. He does a lot of like dungeon synth and atmospheric black metal stuff, and a lot of logoing for a lot of the stuff that goes up on YouTube under atmospheric black metal promotion. I had kind of learned of him through a friend of mine, Danielle. She used to play in a band called Atum, and I had seen that Moonroot had done their stuff, and I was a huge fan of their art style and their logo. The whole album art is actually representative of the three of us that like did the album. So it'd be, I guess, left from right, it would be Aaron, our original vocalist, and then myself as like the three figures on the front. And then you have all the songs kind of referenced throughout the front and the back cover. So you have the spiders for Spawn of Ungoliant, which would be the spiders of Mirkwood from Tolkien. You have the dragon up at the top, which would be Dracarys for Game of Thrones. You have Cursed Lineage with the werewolf in the front. So kind of, I gave him a very, very detailed and over-the-top brief, and he nailed it perfectly.
Awesome. And of course, last year you released your latest single, Obsidian Mirror, and it is absolutely a kick-ass song. So is that going to be like something for like a follow-up to At the Banks of Rubicon, or is that just kind of like a standalone kind of song?
That was kind of a standalone song because we had a vocalist change, and we wanted to have something out there with Aisha, our current vocalist, on there. And then I had a friend of mine who I'd known in high school and college days, and she's a vocal major. So I had her guest and do the soprano vocals on that, just because I wanted something super over the top for that song. And that song was actually an old Suicide Pandemic song that I kind of repurposed and then added that whole slower section at the end of the song. I added that in for Xebellian Triangle and then made the whole thing symphonic. Yeah. So it's another kind of like older song, but it's out of everything probably the most recent song still at that point.
And you mentioned this is like your first single with your current vocalist Aisha. So how did she end up joining, and did she bring in something new to the Xebellian Triangle that you all didn't have before?
So I've known Aisha for a while because she was in a couple bands, she was in a band called Envy of the Dead, and I'd seen her play a lot. That band had gotten some good shows, getting to open like Summer Slaughter Tour for like the Houston dates. She'd been a good friend of mine for quite some time, and then when we had the vocalist change, I sourced like maybe 4 different vocalists that I was looking for, and she was in that list. And just kind of the combination of her drive, her actual vocal tones, kind of everything, she was kind of the one that made the final cut on there and was like the one that we wanted to move forward with.
All right. And talking about like your guitar playing, because I've only been a recent fan of you guys. I've only heard your album, and it's absolutely awesome. And I think your guitar playing is also very technical and also rhythmic at the same time. Do you ever know like music theory, like what kind of scales that you're playing with guitar?
Surprisingly, not really. Like I think of that stuff when I'm in the writing phase of stuff, and I can kind of remember most of my scales and modes. A lot of that is like carryover from my middle school and high school doing band, doing French horn and baritone. And I was in a weird like magnet program school where I had they gave you like this free slot for a class every 9 weeks, and they offered music composition. That was music composition that was going to be inside of the band hall or orchestra hall, and I was able to actually do that twice and actually get to learn with like I think I used Xebellian back then, so I was learning how to compose and whatnot kind of back then. But as far as like metal stuff, honestly, I kind of sometimes throw the theory stuff out the window.
Yeah. And in terms of like your live playing, this will be my first time seeing you all play tonight. Is there like a similar energy to like playing live versus like for recording on CD? Is there any differences or similarities between the two?
I would say recording is extremely like sterile and clinical for us, just given the nature of the music and the nature of how many layers go into the production. For me, at least how I want Xebellian to sound on record, there's not a whole lot of room for like, there's not a whole lot of room for just, how would I word it? Kind of like that loose rock and roll kind of feel. Everything is very surgically precise on the recordings, and then live as well is kind of like, okay, well, now I got to sound that surgically precise live, but because you're a human being and you're not like edited perfect live, I still feel like there's a little bit of that chaotic element, which is fun to experience in the moment as far as playing. So I think it's two kind of different sort of energies that are both good in their own right, I think.
All right. And being as it has been 2 years since At the Banks of Rubicon, I know we have the Obsidian Mirror came out, the single that came out last year. Is there any works on like a new album and stuff, if you're allowed to say?
I am in the process of trying to write a couple more singles and maybe a 3-track EP. We did just release a We did just release a cover of Dimmu Borgir's The Serpentine Offering.
Ooh,
So,
I need to check that out.
We may or may not play it. We may or may not play it tonight. But yeah, I spent a lot of work on that one. And then we had Aaron has been drumming for tons of different bands lately on tour. He's been playing with Fallujah and Enterprise Earth as like the big one that he's been doing a lot of tours with. So he's friends with Travis. Travis loves Dimmu, so we got Travis to do guest vocals on that song as well. So we have him doing some harshes, and then he and I both split Vortex's parts on that song. So
Look, I need to check that out because I'm a huge Dimmu fan.
Yep. And because the original actually is missing like whole sections where there's no orchestra, I actually composed whole new parts for the whole thing, and the symphonic version is also online as well, so you can listen to both versions.
Wow. And so kind of like in the end to wrap things up, what's next for the Xebellian Triangle? I know you're on this awesome run right now with Ice Giants. Just what's next for you guys?
So we have about 5 dates, end of July, beginning of August, that are just all Texas dates in our home state of Texas. I think one of those shows is going to be on opening for Fallujah on their headliner tour with Dawn of Ouroboros, Persephone, and
Vulvodynia.
That's the other one. I couldn't remember the tour package. Oops. But we'll be doing that, and then we have a couple other kind of like DIY shows, and then after that, it's pretty much full-on writing mode. So
awesome. So thank you, Ivy, for this conversation. It's just any final words you want to say to the viewers that are watching this to close this out?
Support symphonic death metal, support whatever you love and enjoy and is great and wholesome and brings people up.
Awesome. So everybody, Ivy from the Xebellian Triangle, see you next